Hello, Oketa One Talk. This is Pacific Waves from R&D Pacific. I'm Susana Swiswiki. Coming up,
we needed to share our story so that we could get support, because a burden shared is a burden halved.
how the miracle baby in the Cook Islands revealed gaps in the healthcare system. Also,
got that like king tides, storm surges, cyclones, quite dramatic events.
Pacific advocates call for more climate finance as COP29 continues on. And later on, an initiative helps translate Kiwi books into 5 Micronesian languages. The mother of Cook Islands' miracle baby, born over 4 months premature, wants an overhaul of maternity healthcare in the country. Louisa Castledine and her daughter Mana are a powerful testament to resilience in the face of adversity. Born prematurely in September last year at just 24 weeks, Mana's survival not only marked a personal victory for the Castledine family, but also uncovered critical gaps in the Cook Islands healthcare system and the urgent need for reform. The Castledine family recently celebrated Mana's first birthday and sat down with Tiana Haxton to share their story.
It was September 2023. Louisa was at home doing dishes when she realised her waters had broken. She was only 23 weeks pregnant. They rushed to the Rarotonga hospital only to be told there were no available doctors.
They said, come back tomorrow. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is a medical emergency. And they explained that there were no doctors and nurses up at the hospital. They were all at a conference. I actually said, no, I'm not leaving till I see a doctor. So they managed to contact a doctor down at the conference to assess me and came with the conclusion that my waters had broken.
The doctor confirming her fears was just the start of a nightmare roller coaster of events for the Castledine family. They were told by doctors the hospital was not equipped to care for a premature birth in the Cook Islands. Her only hope was a medevac to New Zealand, but there were no available hospital beds.
And I was instantly flooded with the idea that I was losing a baby. I actually waited in hospital here in the Cook Islands for 3 days before I could actually be medevaced to New Zealand. And so in that time, it was really daunting because I was conscious at any point I could go into labour and she wouldn't have the support that she needed in order to survive.
When the family finally arrived in New Zealand, the gravity of their situation overwhelmed them as they faced life-altering decisions regarding pre-me care. Presented with 2 stark options, intensive care or comfort care, the family felt lost and turned to social media to share their journey and seek support. Thousands rallied to their cry for help, forming a support network for the family that proved crucial in the months ahead.
It was full on. We were kind of faced with decisions around extreme prematurity to staring at the barrel of long-term disabilities that doctors essentially sat us down to discuss our options. And in those moments, we were quite overwhelmed. So we felt as though we needed to share our story so that we could get support, because a burden shared is a burden halved.
Just a week after arriving in Aotearoa, Mana Te Hinetoa Pearl Castledine kicked her way into the world. Weighing only 653 grams, Powerful Female Warrior was a fitting name for Mark and Luisa's 3rd child born into battle. After 8 complication-riddled months, Mana had pulled through and was cleared to return home to the Cook Islands. However, upon returning to Rarotonga, the family were reminded of the stark differences in maternity care between the Cook Islands and New Zealand. In New Zealand, they felt surrounded by medical support, with specialists and counsellors at the ready and a barrage of provisions for the family.
As soon as we hit the hospital in New Zealand, we were approached by a number of specialists. And so there was a full wraparound support from start to finish. Whereas in Rarotonga, I am aware that we are really limited in our resources, but There needs to be an overhaul and better support for our families and our mums.
The Secretary of the Cook Islands Ministry of Health, Bob Williams, says they are addressing the gaps in the system and are introducing a new initiative focusing on enhanced maternity care and the first 1,000 days after birth.
We need to strengthen how we care for our babies since birth in the first 1,000 days before they get into the school system, to ensure that babies get the best healthy meals and drinks that they need to grow to be a healthier baby and young child.
He says the first few years of a baby's life sets the foundations for their future health and well-being. The ministry has recently introduced antenatal classes for expecting mothers to better equip them for motherhood, and local midwives are involved in the new postnatal program, visiting new mothers regularly for the first 6 weeks after birth. Bob Williams says there are also plans on the horizon to train more midwives, fully upgrade the maternity ward at the Rarotonga Hospital, and extend maternity leave from 3 weeks to 3 months.
By law, it's only 6 weeks. But again, to support the first 1,000 days, maternity leave is important to be part of that. So part of the discussion is for that to be increased to at least 12 weeks.
For the Castledine family, baby Mana is now a bubbling, thriving 1-year-old, but her parents are conscious of how different their story could have been.
To arrive at the hospital and be told to come back the next day could have meant the difference between life and death for my daughter. Luckily for me, I was strong enough to say, no, I'm not leaving. Had that been a younger first-time mum who encountered that, she probably would have gone home and laboured at home and had a very different outcome to me.
While the Health Ministry's current upgrade plans do not yet equip them to handle premature births, Williams is confident they are heading in the right direction. He says with time, resources and funding, they will grow to be less reliant on medical evacuations to New Zealand.
I think 99% of the babies that are born, we can do it here, given the resources that we have in country and the specialists available. But should there be any beyond our capacity to safely deliver them, then we have to refer them to New Zealand.
Currently, the ministry has a team of 5 in Fiji undergoing extensive midwifery training to further bolster the new maternity services in Rarotonga. Mr. Williams says they expect the planned upgrades to the maternity ward to be complete by the end of the year. They will also be opening a new family block in the ward where new mothers can stay and have access to medical guidance 24/7 while navigating the first few days with their newborns.
Pacific climate leaders want to see a real increase in climate finance at the UN Climate Change Conference in Azerbaijan, which is being called the Finance COP. This year, parties will review the current global climate finance goal, with one climate advocate saying the discussion needs to move from billions to trillions of dollars. Caleb Fotheringham has more.
Biodiversity destroyed in sweltering seas. Workers and pilgrims collapsing in insufferable heat.
That's UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres addressing global climate leaders at the UN Climate Change Conference, saying 2024 has been a masterclass in climate destruction. He says there needs to be more climate finance and it needs to be accessible.
COP29 must tear down the walls of climate finance. Developing countries must not leave Baku empty-handed. A deal is a must, and I'm confident it will be reached.
This year, countries are seeking to establish a new annual climate financing target to replace the $100 billion pledge set in 2009 for developed nations to help developing countries reduce emissions and adapt to climate impacts. The Director of Climate Change for the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Programme, Tangaloa Cooper, says discussions now need to be in the trillions, not billions, because of the high cost of adaptation.
The Pacific wants to come away with agreement on climate finance, on real increase in finance, commitment to that finance increase, commitment to finance flow, making it more accessible for small developing countries like the Pacific.
Ms. Cooper says another Pacific priority is holding on to the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which she says is non-negotiable.
Parties, by not making their national determined contributions, their reporting ambitious, is a move away from a goal of 1.5.
Prior to the event starting, the BBC released a video of the chief executive of the COP29 team, Alnur Sultanov, seemingly discussing investment opportunities in Azerbaijan's state oil and gas company.
We have a lot of pipeline infrastructure. We have a lot of gas fields that are to be developed.
Ms. Cooper says she doesn't know the details surrounding the video, but it's a big concern for the Pacific and it's counterproductive.
That's a disappointment. Obviously, that undermines the integrity of the COP presidency, if in fact it is true.
Marshall Islands President Helder Heine has warned nations that everyone will face climate consequences if there's inaction.
The misplaced idea that their country somehow will be immune. The fallacy that their short-term interests are worth the destruction on their doorstep and that they will escape without blame.
Meanwhile, a report has found many children in the Pacific region feel unsafe from the effects of climate change. Researcher Hannah Taylor-Moller says the World Vision report found more extreme weather events are also affecting young people's economic opportunities and mental health.
Pacific respondents talked about feeling unsafe, and that's because we know in the Pacific it's really high exposure to disasters. Vanuatu is actually number one in the world for exposure to disasters. So we've got that like king tides, storm surges, cyclones, quite dramatic events.
COP29 has wrapped up its second day and will continue until Friday.
The violence at Porgera in Papua New Guinea, which claimed a number of lives and saw homes destroyed, has been brought under control by a beefed-up security presence. But the concerns for the leaders of the State of Emergency, or SOE, are what will happen when they leave. Both Commander Joseph Tondop and one of his assistants, Nixon Pakia, have suggested some things political leaders and the community could do to ensure the violence doesn't reignite. Don Wiseman reports.
The SOE came after violent tribal fighting around the Porgera mine, some involving illegal miners operating inside the mine itself. Joseph Tondop believes the greater security presence is making progress in combating the violence, but he fears a resurgence when the SOE ends next month. He says the local police will have to work around the clock, working with the community.
Our greatest strength is the community. These are issues affecting the communities. If the community start taking ownership with good leadership from the police commander on the ground and other, local commanders, I'm sure we are going to go a long way in trying to address it. I mean, Enga is not a bad place.
Mr. Tondop says the major issue for police is the complexity of the tribal links in the area, to allow incidents involving one to quickly escalate.
One man's problem is accused of killing another person. In this part of the region, it's not that one person's problem now. It's a tribal problem. So in that tribe, you're looking at 3 to 4 to 5,000 people. So that one person's problem, one person killing one person, it's like the 3,000 people are involved. That's the complexity of the whole law and order situation here.
Mr. Tondop also sees a need for local politicians to do more.
We have councillors there. They're on the payroll. All we need to do is we need to strengthen their roles and responsibilities. We have a village court systems in place. All we need to do is we need to just strengthen all this. It's the provincial government's job to see where the gaps are and strengthen those gaps. There's too much talking by politicians. We're not filling those gaps.
A businessman in Porgera says life remains tough for the people in the district. The region's only access road remains cut off by a landslide, which occurred last May near the village of Yambali. Porgera Chamber of Commerce head and Deputy SOE Controller Nixon Pakia says the Panguna mine is able to operate a reduced service relying on material airlifted in. But for the people and businesses in Porgera, the struggle continues.
Goods and services, especially food supplies to Porgera, is at this time very critical life we are facing because we don't have food supplies into Porgera. Informal vendors are trying their best to bring the foods into Porgera, but they are tripling the prices because of the goods have been sold out onto the other side of the road.
Nixon Parkia was referring to traders having to manually carry the goods past the slip, so adding to their costs. Both men say keeping illegal miners out of the huge Porgera mine is vital for their own safety and to stem violent clashes, which quickly escalate to tribal confrontations. Mr Tondop says sometimes there have been several thousand illegal miners in the pit. He says most of these people are from other districts in Enga or other Highlands provinces rather than being Porgera locals. Mr Parkia wants to see efforts made to redirect the energies of these mostly youthful miners.
The SOE is assisting us to return fees and normalcy, but it is for a duration of 3 months. And I am seeing the police are doing their best, but there must be a long-term solution. There must be a peace. There must be a peace. So the long-term solution is government must have to look at the long-term. Government and developer have to look at the long-term solution. Because since the mine is here, illegal mining will be here as well. Illegal miners will still go into, even when the police, SO call out operation is exhausted. So the lasting solution, which I am asking the government to do, is to partner with the local authorities, get the youth involved in some activities so that they cannot risk their lives into the minefield again. Rather, subsidize some youth programs, youth training programs, capacity building for youth, or have some fundings available for youth to, get the uncompleted or those, dropout students can get into some, form of education, form of, financial literacy training.
The SOE is set to finish in December, but Nixon Parkia would like to see an extension.
Children in Micronesia will soon be receiving New Zealand early childhood education books translated into their own native languages. The initiative from Auckland-based Sunshine Books and Read Pacific started from conversations with education authorities in the Federated States of Micronesia who expressed interest in the resources. Sunshine Books publisher Dame Wendy Pai and Read Pacific Managing Director Ray McKean spoke with Koroi Hawkins about the project, which will see books translated into 5 Micronesian languages and distributed to schools throughout the FSM.
So, just a little bit of background. Me and my daughter, who's my general manager on the next generation of Read Pacific, if you like, we went up to Micronesia back in February and met with the Department of Education at Ponape. There is 4 states up there, Ponape, Chuuk, Yap and Cosray. Every Department of Education has their own languages they're trying to teach in and then transitioning into English. With Yap, there is 2 dialects. So they came to us and loved Wendy's decodable books and said this is a great foundation for starting to teach in English. But they also then said to us they would like their children to be able to read in their own local languages, which is how the translation project came about. It took many months and a lot of work behind the scenes, but eventually Wendy came up with a solution, fabulous solution, to put her books, 120 of her books, into these. It's actually 5 languages because, as I say, one state has 2 languages, the state of Yap. So that's how it came about, meeting with them in person, and obviously the Federated States of Micronesia government was extremely excited to be able to have really well-known readers in their own languages. And I'll hand over to Wendy for the fun part of it.
Well,
it
was quite a challenge because, you're working with ministries of education, but you're also working at a high level with very talented people who know the language as well, the translators. And of course, the languages are very unfamiliar to us. Te Reo Maori would be easy. Samoan would be quite easy, right? Put it that way for most of my team. But really, when you get to, and even Tongan language would be easier, but when you get to these languages I've never seen and they've never been published before. So it's really quite, challenging, in other words. So we had a team of people working on a way, thank goodness for the internet, put it that way, thank goodness for the internet, going back and forward. And also, sometimes stories can be translated, but they have to be translated correctly because it may be an English comment or an English saying, for example, And you have to translate that to the meaning of what the illustration is for the child. A lot of things aren't just straight translation. They are actually translation with meaning, right? Because you're reading for meaning. We are teaching children to learn, not only in their own language, but we're teaching them to understand their own language, which is important as well, right? So you're not just learning a whole lot of words, you're learning a context, in other words, you're learning in a context sentence structure. So it's been an interesting project. We've done many translations because we translate all over the world for people in books, but this has been very special. To me, it's very special because imagine New Zealand, this is a day for celebration of New Zealand, and thank you for being part of this celebration. I think it's a celebration for not only our talented writers, our illustrators, the people in this country who produce wonderful literature. It's a celebration also, and you would agree with me, Ray, of what we can do as a country to contribute. I know we contribute aid projects in the sense of, water, clean water for people, and other people with different infrastructure where we're building things for infrastructure. But this is really important because this goes to a very small island in a little isolated place. And imagine the love and the wonderful enjoyment those children are going to have. It's a sort of special thing that New Zealand can do, I think, from a contribution as well. And we've sort of put a lot of effort into it, and Ray's put a lot of effort into it, and we've, donated a lot of our time to make this work, because it's very important for me that those little children really feel very important, and they learn English as well, so they can take their place in jobs and the tourist industry, as I said. But it's also important that they feel this is something special for me. Isn't that wonderful that we can share that?
Absolutely. Well, perfectly said, Wendy. I couldn't put it any better.
This is the great thing about education, And, I recently talked to someone in a particular island about clean water, because one of the problems of course, is having, children have to leave school early to carry the water, long distances, and the women are carrying the water long distances. And, we all need to work together. But as a country, I think that this is our contribution. This is Ray's company and my company, a contribution to those countries, and they have responded very positively. They have congratulated us on the way we've worked. They've congratulated us at the moment the books are printing, and they will be distributed in a few months' time, and we'll have some photos to share with people, which is great.
Nice. And I might just end on the nuts and bolts of that. Next steps, maybe, Ray, if you want to fill us in on exactly when these books are heading out and all of that.
They're currently being printed at the moment. That's correct, isn't it, Wendy?
Yes, they're being printed at the moment, yes.
And then once they're printed, they will go for a very long trip around the ocean, because I don't know if you're aware of Micronesia, but it's a little
in
dot.
A rowboat. In a rowboat.
Where they're going into all 4 states, so they will leave Hong Kong, and some of them, one boat's going to Ponape, the state of Ponape, another one will go into Yap, another one into Cosray, all on separate ships. And then the final one, Chuuk, which is our most remote bunch of islands, we actually ship it into Ponape, and then I charter the cargo hold of the United Airlines Island Hopper plane, and we load it all into there, and it gets flown in on United Airlines direct into Chuuk, because it's so difficult to ship into there. So it does take a bit of a trip, and it takes about 6 to 8 weeks out of Hong Kong to actually get them into each location.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for your time and sharing about your wonderful work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā soifua.